All right, welcome in. It is Conversation Monday here, and we bring in a local celebrity, former local celebrity, a guy that got me my start in the radio podcast business here, and actually, in a roundabout way, the how I came up with the name Conversation Mondays. Now, Steve, I don't know if you remember this, but when I first started doing a couple of segments with you on the mix, first time I sat in with you, you asked if I wanted to come on and talk. I said, "Yeah, sure. What are we going to talk about?" We're just going to have a conversation, and so this is kind of my idea of what I said is, you know what, I just when I have people on, we're just going to have a conversation. We're going to see where it goes and go from there. So, like I said, it is Steve Stroud, local legend of Dickinson, North Dakota.
You're too kind, Dylan.
Well, I try to. Now you're down in Arizona right now. I'm guessing the weather is a little bit better than what it is here. Do you mind sending some warm weather up this way?
I've been trying, and strangely enough, when we came down in September from North Dakota, we had an unusually cool and wet winter and spring here in Arizona. So um, I think we brought it with us. It hasn't returned, or it hasn't returned the favor because I understand you guys had snow and really strong winds today.
Yes, yeah, it was some snow flurries when I got off of work and I was walking in and I was looking before I closed our my blinds that it was yeah, it was some snow flurries, but hopefully it's going to melt. And I just got back from Mexico last night. So I tried to bring some warm weather too and it didn't work. So I was relying on you to kind of send us some nice weather because it's the golf course, I can hear it's ready and it's calling my name. I might have to go back down to Arizona again to get some swings
I
in.
hear you. Did you go to Mexico just for fun, or?
I won a trip through work and it was Saturday to Wednesday and just kind of hung out on the beach and the bar pool and just kind of enjoyed my time with no responsibilities and just relaxed and
You got
soaked up some sun. Got a little bit more of a tan, darker complexion than when went down there.
well, and you got to do that. You got to just put everything down for a few days and get away sometimes, and that refreshes everything. And when you get back to where you call home, you get back there, and it's a new start, if you will.
Yeah, something like that. That was kind of my goal too, is just not go too rowdy because there's plenty of vacations that you go on where you get back and you're more exhausted than when you went on vacation. You almost need another vacation from the vacation.
Kind of,
Oh, can you hear
yeah, I
me?
can now. You kind of froze up there for a.
Oh, oh, gotcha. Yeah, I was saying that it gets so sometimes those vacations are so hectic where you almost need a vacation from the vacation.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, the weather's been nice here. Here in the last few weeks, we uh, actually got up to just about 100 one day here a couple weeks ago. But then we had a little cooler stretch, only in the 70s and 80s, and that's where I'm comfortable. So we haven't been down here for a full summer yet, so we don't know what it's going to be like. But certainly, there's plenty to do outdoors, and you just have to adapt, just like you do in North Dakota.
Yeah, well, they everybody says it's a dry heat down there. I don't know. I think when you get up to that 110, 115 degrees, that's hot no matter what.
Yeah.
But
Well, I spent
so
some time in Tampa, St. Pete, Florida many years ago. And I remember it was September when I got off the plane and I walked outside, and it literally took my breath away, the humidity especially. And so when they say a dry heat, it is a little cooler than a hot heat, but you're right, 110 is 110, right?
okay, did you do radio down there in St. Tampa, St. Petersburg, or were you just visiting on vacation
No, I
then?
work for an entertainment company. I was down there on a contract in a hotel in Tampa, St. Pete back in the early 90s.
Oh,
So
okay, was that one of your first jobs in radio?
no, it was actually I started in the radio business in Glendive, Montana back in '87. after going to Brown Institute in Minneapolis for broadcasting. Um, and then got into radio and quickly realized that either you had to find a second job because radio as an announcer per se was not going to pay the bills. When I first moved to Dickinson in the mid 90s, is kind of where things got rolling in the radio business for me, more so than just doing announcing, but doing sales. And then it turned into management. And ultimately, my goal was to own a radio station. And I was blessed with the opportunity to do that with some local people, as you know. And it was a great situation, and loved every minute of it. There were challenges, no doubt about it. And of course, when we hit COVID in March of 20, things really turned upside down for everybody, especially in the media business when it came to advertising. But all in all, great experience. It's been a long run, and um, I wanted to kind of step away from the broadcast business. Although if it's in your blood, it's in your blood. I wanted to get into broadcasting when I was in high school. I love sports. I was always around sports, participated in sports, and I wanted to carry that over into broadcasting. And my buddies and I used to take back in the 80s when they had tune boxes, as they were called, big radios. We'd take microphones and we'd sit up in the bleachers for the basketball games, and we'd go back and forth and we'd record us ourselves, and then we'd listen back, and that's really where it got started. So
Okay, and then so you recorded them and then would you guys like take notes and kind of critique yourselves, or just have it there, and then, or would you try to like sync it up with the game itself
well, there was no
as far as like
yeah.
as far as like a recording of the game?
Yeah, it was play by play, and of course there was no video of it, but it was play by play, and we just wanted to do it to see where it went, and we were going back and forth, and we joke around, and sometimes we got carried away. We were high school students, but it truly was when you sat back and listened to it, you said, "Man, I could have done that better," or I got to make sure that the next time I do this or that. We made adjustments, especially with like volume. I mean, you're talking about a couple of microphones plugged into a giant radio with a handle on it, back in the 80s. So,
Okay, did you get any complaints from fans with the way of calling the game, or was it quiet enough to where people weren't able to hear it?
well, generally speaking, yeah, we were far enough. We would go way up in like the corner, away from the crowd, and back then, especially with some of the basketball games, there weren't huge crowds at some of the games, so um, we would go as far away from the crowd as possible. But you also want a little crowd noise behind you, when you're doing it. But I don't think we ever had any issues with anybody complaining that we were. I went to Osseo High School in the Minneapolis St. Paul area, and my graduating class was 559. So we had a huge campus, and we had a big gymnasium and bleachers on both sides, and it was a pretty good area. So we didn't worry too much about if anybody um, was close enough to not be able to pay attention to the game.
Okay, and then so which high school did you go to?
Osseo.
Osseo. Okay, that's right. I know you've told me that, but it's been a while since we've actually sat down and talked a while, so I couldn't remember. I knew it was somewhere in the cities, but you graduated from Osseo, and then you went to Brown, and you're actually back-to-back guests that we've had on our episode that came out last Thursday was a Brown grad as well. His name's Ross Brendel. He does a local sports podcast in Minneapolis right
Oh,
now.
nice.
So back-to-back Brown
There you
alums,
go.
and you said you wanted to start doing you started doing broadcasting games. Now, when you went to Brown, I'm guessing you were introduced to a bunch of different, as far as like music stations, news stations, sports broadcasting. Were there any other interests that you were interested in that you thought might be different avenues?
Well, back then, Brown Institute was a well balanced curriculum for radio people. You could learn everything from programming to engineering to, I mean, even sales and things like that, management. Um, they train people for. We also took a TV class. It was a short 3-month TV section, but they also taught people how to be program directors and things like that. And it was more about getting hands-on experience and actually doing things. So basically, we would go to class, and for 4 hours, you basically ran a radio station. And one day you might have been the news person, and the next day you might have been doing the weather, and the next day you were the director, the producer of the show, or managing the music or what have you. So you got to learn a lot of different areas. One of the main reasons I went to Brown was because of their connections. They're very well renowned. I would say the best broadcast school in the country, and very well renowned. And they've got great connections with stations, with radio stations, TV stations. I also got a lead through them. I was the PA announcer at Parade Stadium in Minneapolis for semi-pro baseball games. When
Okay. What team
Well,
was that?
honestly, I can't even remember who the team was, but it was interesting. And they'd give me their roster and they'd give me their lineup card, but then they'd have nicknames for the players that they wanted announced. It was pretty loose, but it was a lot of fun. And of course, you're at Parade Stadium in downtown Minneapolis, and the lights are on in the evening, and it's the skyline of Minneapolis in the background. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And then so you had all those experiences. Did you have any that you liked more than others, or was it all pretty balanced? I'm guessing you kind of were being exposed to so many different avenues that the career brings. There had to be few parts of the job you liked, some that you didn't like. Were there what did you have as far as that goes?
Well, in the radio business, it's like most businesses. If you're going to do sales, that's where the money's at. You can always tell when you go to the parking lot of a radio station who driving the nicer cars, the nicer vehicles. It's the salespeople, because they're generating the revenue, so they get paid better. And I quickly realized that just being an announcer wasn't going to cut it. And so I started doing sales. And when I moved to Dickinson in '96, we put KCAD, brand new station, on the air doing FM country. And right out of the chute, it was part time sales, part time announcing. Ultimately, it developed into full time sales, and then ultimately into managing the three stations for what was Clear Channel at the time. So I would, there are a lot of different areas in the broadcast industry, something for everybody, and that sounds cliche, but um, when we first had the conversation about starting a new station, and with me managing it, I was excited about that for many reasons. Obviously, it was an opportunity to be a part owner for the first time in my career, but also to get a well balanced diet, basically, of different areas. I mean, everything from taking the garbage out to, you know, broadcasting sports, morning show, sales, traffic, a little bit of everything. And that's really what I enjoyed. Was no one day was like the next, and typically it isn't in the radio business. There's always a curveball coming your way.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then so like while you were at Brown, what type of opportunities were you able to do outside of your classes, and were you able to kind of branch out? You mentioned doing the baseball, the baseball team. What other opportunities did you take advantage of while you were still living in the cities, as far as doing broadcasting and getting kind of that real life experience?
Well, I went on some trips with some broadcasters from stations that had good connections with Brown Institute. I also was in a class with a guy named Kevin, and I can't remember his last name, but he had a real strong Southern accent, and he knew baseball like the back of his hand. He ultimately went on to go down to Florida and work down there doing sports, and then ultimately turned into sports television. Um, but that was one of the opportunities, and that's really where it kind of solidified, which specific area. Um, Especially with sports, because I love sports. I love all sports, and I'm around them, and so And in fact, now I'm working for Maricopa Schools in the athletic department. I guess I just can't stay away from sports, but
Yeah.
you know, it it was a lot of different opportunities. There were things that would come up, and they'd say, "Hey, Steve, you want to do this?" or "Steve, you want to try that?" or whatever. And if it didn't fit the schedule, we still had classes to attend to and things to take care of. And I lived about 40 miles in Maple Grove, outside of where the campus was for Brown Institute. So it wasn't like we lived on campus or anything like that. But there were a lot of opportunities, and like I said, especially the connections. Mike Cronforst, I don't think he's the connection guy there anymore, but he was the placement director for Brown Institute when I was there, and he has placed more broadcasters into the industry than any other human on the planet.
Yeah, and I think I want to say Ross said that they unfortunately they shut down, they closed their doors for good. So I don't even know if they are. It doesn't sound like they're even a school
That
anymore.
very
Um,
possibly might not be. Now, they weren't just broadcasting, but obviously that's what I went for. But they had some other classes, business classes, that people could take in the same campus. I actually was in my second quarter of school, and they opened up the brand new building on the corner of Lake and Hiawatha, I think it was. Prior to that, it was in a uh, kind of a rundown area, and it was in these buildings that they had acquired in not a really nice area. Well, then they built this brand new campus, beautiful place. Everything was new. So when we went and played radio for 4 hours each weekday, it was all brand new equipment and everything. So kind of neat.
okay, yeah, for sure. And then, so did you growing up? Did you have any um, broadcasters, media people that you looked up to that you kind of modeled your broadcast after?
Well, I spent some of my elementary years and my junior high years in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. And there was a gentleman by the name of Oates LeGrand who has since passed, but classic radio voice, especially for sports. And he, I don't remember his real first name, but they called him Oates because he liked to eat oatmeal. And everybody knew Oates LeGrand. He would go and he would broadcast the Spartans of Fergus Falls Community College basketball games and football games, and then all the high school stuff. And then another gentleman, Craig Olson in Fergus Falls, once Oates had retired, Craig kind of became the local guy. And if you needed sports, you went to Craig Olson. And those are two guys that I listened to growing up. I got to work with Craig many years later in Fergus Falls, but just long time legends of radio broadcasting in Minnesota.
Okay, that's always interesting. Um, and then so you mentioned your first job was in Glendive. Now, was that the only offer you had, did you kind of have an idea of where you wanted to go, or was Glendive the only place that gave you a job, or did you interview at several different places, or had offers and then Glendive felt like the best opportunity, or what got you what made you decide to take the job in Glendive, and what station was it?
Great question, Dylan. I was in the Twin Cities still. After I had graduated, it was like a few months after, and I'd had some calls. Um, you know, we all make mistakes. So I remember distinctly, I got a call from a guy, and this is back in the day, a long time ago, Stone Age, before cell phones, before voicemail, and I think it was even before answering machines, Dylan. And I got a phone call one day, and I wasn't home, and my roommate answered the phone and said, "Oh, he's not here right now." And the guy said, "Well, have him call blah 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 at blah 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 radio station." I don't remember where it was. I probably should remember because it was one one of those life experiences that you learn from. And so when I got home, I got the message, and I called the radio station. The number, now he wasn't specific with his message, but I called the radio station and I left a message, and I said, and this was the mistake. I said, I'm Steve Stroud, and I'm calling about the job opening there. Well, the person that answered the phone that I gave the message to was the person they were replacing. So
Oh.
that was a big red flag to that person that something in their life was going to change very soon. And I was the knothead who basically told him that. So that then he called me back the next day and chewed my butt and said, "Don't you know anything about blah 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 blah?" And ultimately, I knew right away that I was not going to work for this guy anyways. But and I didn't have a shot at that point. But I learned not to divulge information to the wrong people. That just leave your name and number, and they'll call you back.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good lesson. That is a good lesson for sure. But you still ended up going out there or
That was a different station. So I had a few.
oh, okay.
But Glendive was close enough to. I was born in Minot. Glendive was close enough to North Dakota, and it wasn't too far from Minnesota. I had some other offers that were a little further away, and I just didn't feel comfortable for my first job, committing to something that was a distance away. And so I packed up and went out to Glendive, and they went into what back then they were calling automation, which everything is automated now. Everything is computerized. This was then 87, and it was very, very early in any form of automation. We were still playing records. We were playing our own
Oh,
music. We would pick the records. There was nothing computerized. Um, Everything was on carts. If you had commercials to play, you'd get a list of commercials, an ad log, and then you'd plug the carts into the machine and you'd push play, and it would play the 30-second ad or the 60-second ad, and then we'd play music, and then we'd give the forecast, and yeah, it was. And it, actually, the equipment there in Glendive at the time, they had the buttons that you can use to control, like when you operated the board at the mix, Dylan, you'd swipe your finger across this light and that would turn it on and off. There was no clicking switches or turning dials. It was very, very unusual.
oh wow. So you said they were playing records. Now, were you like when these songs were playing, did you have them, were they stacked or how did that work? Because like changing, like I'm I was very end. My parents had records and they had a record player
Mm-hmm.
because like changing and I'm sure it was a lot fancier than like the one that my parents had. That's just like kind of your basic generic record player, but like taking it out, like lifting the uh, I don't even know what it's called, but and then putting a new one on, that had to be a very quick, precise process. How did that
Well, we had
all
two
work?
record players, and yeah, we had two record players, and they were old. These were old fashioned. They were not. They were not where you flipped your finger across a light. They were not high tech at that time. These were old turntables, but you'd have one record on each turntable. You'd already have it queued up. And when you were done doing whatever you were talking about or playing an ad or whatever, and you went into music, it was kind of like it was like a clutch on a vehicle. You hold the thing until you're ready to go, and you let her fly so that you didn't hear it come on. If you've heard old records where that you hear them come on, and go all of a sudden the record's playing. Well, it didn't do that because you knew what you had to do. But yeah, we were playing records, and everything was antiquated back then. Again, that was 1987, so that was a long time ago. So when I finally hung up the mic there at the mix, it was a long journey, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, and then so you talked about how like you'd slide your finger over on the board. Now, how touchy was that? Were there times where it wouldn't register at all, or you'd have to do it again and there'd just be dead air, or was it always pretty reliable, like technology usually
Well, you
is?
had to make sure that where those little lights were, where your finger would go across, you had to make sure they were clean because if you spilled something on them, it wouldn't know your finger was there. So um, each each record player had its own volume control, and each one had its own set of lights. and there was a light for on and a light for off, and you just flip your finger across it. Some people would just hold their finger there to make sure that it got turned on properly.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. And then so technology, yeah, definitely has come a long way. Now, what type of music were they playing there? Was it country? Was it rock, pop, or what was the music at those
It
stations?
was unique, and that was one of the reasons it attracted to me when I talked to the program director back then. His name was Mike Coyan. He said, "We play a little bit of everything." And I thought, yeah, that's what they all say, right? Because when you come out of broadcasting school and take your first job, the last thing you want to do is be playing a type of music that you don't enjoy, right? I mean, uh,
Yep.
if it was playing opera, that wouldn't have been up my alley. So the fact that they played a little bit of everything, and actually, it was an AM. It was KXGN AM, the amazing AM they called it in Glendive, and they they were only on the air from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. They were a daytimer, as they call it, and so different parts of the day we would play different music, just like we did with the mix. We would day part some of it. Um, some of the songs that were big, I remember playing. Um, White Snake, Here I Go Again was just out. Um, George Michael, I Want Your Sex was a brand new song back then. Those were a couple of songs that didn't get played until the evening for a variety of reasons. But um, for the most part, we played some country, we played some pop, we played some rock, and our program director Mike would have all of that set out. He had like a pie shape thing on a piece of paper that would say, okay, at this time of the hour, play a country song. At this time, play a rock song. At this time, play a pop song. So, yeah.
Okay. And then were you doing were you broadcasting sporting events at that time too, or was it just strictly radio DJ?
Well, I wasn't doing the sports, and part of the reason was because they had a longtime legend named Dan Frenzel that was doing the sports. Dapper Dan was his name. And
Okay.
if you go to any coffee shop in Glendive, Montana during the day or the following day, especially a Saturday after a football game, everybody'd be talking about the football game and the broadcast from Dapper Dan. And I think he would do a Saturday morning recap, show for a couple hours on Saturday mornings. And so there really wasn't a spot for me to do that, especially with a guy that had all the experience he had. And I don't know where he ended up as far as how many years he did, but he also was a legend in broadcasting in eastern Montana.
Okay, I gotcha. What did you get to have any big takeaways that you took from that first job in Glendive as far as from whether it be from Dapper Dan or anybody else at the station?
Well, I quickly learned, Dylan, that $4.50 an hour was not going to pay the rent, and that's what radio was paying back in Glendive, Montana. So I would work in the evening at one of the downtown bars, DJing in the bar. To make a little extra money and actually paid a lot more than the radio business did. But I knew that I still had a love for radio and I didn't want to completely, give it up.
Yeah, well, and you did some DJing in the cities too, I believe, correct?
I did, yeah. And there again, the
Where'd you do that at?
in the cities,
Yeah.
various places. When I was in Tampa, St. Petersburg, that was part of a contract. I was in Brownsville, Texas. My third contract was in Boston, Massachusetts. So I got to travel around and see the country and stay in hotels. And I worked for Stuart Anderson's Cattle Company Group in the Twin Cities. And actually, I transferred with them down to Arizona back in 1989, I think it was. And came down here, and it was in February. I think it was Valentine's Day, as a matter of fact. And I left in the middle of May, and it was 110. So going back to what we were talking about earlier with the temperatures. So I went
Yeah.
from that. I went from Minneapolis in February, probably cold and snowy, down to the Phoenix area. And then 3 months later, after my training was done, I went back up to Minneapolis.
Okay, and then where did you and you said you went from did you go from Glendive down to Florida, or were there a few stops in between?
No, when I went back to Glendive after it would have been '88 by then. That's when I started with Stuart Anderson's Cattle Company. Then I went,
Okay.
and then after that, I worked for the company where I traveled around the country. So,
Oh,
and then
gotcha.
when I
So oh, go ahead,
and
finish.
then when I got done with that, that's when I realized now I don't want to be working in the bars every night. I don't want to be living in hotels. I want to settle down. I want to put some roots down. I want to get back into radio full fledged. And and the next thing you know, I'm in Dickinson, North Dakota.
Okay, and what year was that you moved to Dickinson?
November of '96.
November. Okay, I wouldn't have even been a year. No, I would have been a year and about 11 months.
So
Year and 10 months.
so you probably
So I was
shovel in your hand, shoveling that horrible winter we had. That was my first experience. Everybody told me, it's the banana belt. It's a lot warmer. You'll love it out there. It's warmer than the United States. And the winter of '96, early '97 was one of the worst in history. It was bitter cold, windy, and a bunch of snow. And I'm like, they lied to me.
That sounds like the winter we had here. I think we broke whenever the record was, we broke it for snow this year.
I think
Over 100 inches.
you
What's
went over
that?
100 inches, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't remember the exact total. I don't care. It was a lot. Similar to, temperature that you guys have down in Arizona.
Uh-huh.
Anything over 100 is a lot of snow. It was a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
so so you're in Dickinson and you're working at the station. Were you now which station was it? Was it 99.1?
Yeah. Well, actually, it was Ray David owned KLTC and KCAD, which was 99.1. And then Roberts Radio bought those two and added KRRB and switched it to KZRX. That was in like '97. And so then
Okay.
Ray David, then I worked for Roberts Radio, and then Roberts Radio ultimately got bought out by iHeart or Clear Channel at the time. And that's when I transferred. I took a management job in Carrington, and then I bounced around from Carrington to several different places before coming back to Dickinson in 2006. And that was, uh, 16 years that I was in Dickinson again. So
Okay. So you were would have been covering right around when Jim Kleinsasser was in Carrington, not?
right after he left. Yep.
Okay. So he was in Grand Forks by that time.
Yep. He,
So,
of
okay. And then
course, I talked to everybody there, and they said Jim Kleinsasser was a man compared to boys. I mean, he was his physically speaking, he was
yeah.
way above. We did some radio stuff there in Carrington with him. He did. He would come back when he was with the Vikings. He would come back to Carrington and do fundraisers and sign autographs and stuff, and always very willing to help.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. I remember seeing videos of him in high school. There's from when they won the state championship in basketball. I remember seeing. I found a video of it on YouTube, and he was just a man amongst boys. You could definitely tell that he was bigger than everybody else and stronger. And I remember our track coach Craig Kovash talking about him at the state track, how he would go. He went and broke the state champ or state record in shot put and discus, and
Hmm?
then he would go and anchor their sprint
Yeah,
relays.
yeah, he was different. There's no doubt. I mean, he would. They said in basketball, he would stand under the hoop with the ball in his hand with two hands, and he would jump straight up and dunk. He was just different. And just down the road in Jamestown, Darren Erstad was playing for Jamestown High, and a
Oh,
fellow broadcaster, Gavin, there in Jamestown, got to watch him play some high school baseball and then Legion ball, and got to see Darren Erstad hit a few bombs out of Jack Brown Stadium there in Jamestown, a very picturesque ballpark if you ever get to watch some baseball there. They got the vinery and everything, But yeah, Darren Erstad and Gavin said he was the same way. He just was different. He was, you knew he was going to be something extra special.
Yeah, well, he was the punter for a national champion team down in Nebraska on the football team. He was the number one overall pick in, I don't remember the exact year, but he was the number one pick in the MLB draft. I believe, I want to say he was a heck of a hockey player too.
Yeah, he was a multi-sport athlete. It probably wasn't anything he couldn't have done. I think the Angels drafted him, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, yep. And then he won a World Series with them in '02. I want to say it was the year. Yeah, '02. And now he used to be the head baseball coach down in Nebraska. But you mentioned you got to interview Jim Kleinsasser. Who else have you gotten to interview it, the opportunity to interview outside of um, Kleinsasser? Some other big names.
Well, it would probably fall into the music category more than with concerts and stuff. The late Eddie Money is always a classic. A lot of the acts that came to Rough Rider days, Lone Star and Little Texas and Diamond Rio and people like that. Um, some comedians, Jeff Foxworthy, but probably more on that end. Not a lot of people in the sports industry necessarily that were, you know, part of the interviews or anything like that. I would say mostly musicians.
Okay. Do you have any good memorable stories from those interviews or?
I don't think there's anything that really jumps out other than the fact that we had somebody else that was working at the station. And I basically said, you know what, I want you to do this interview. And it was George Thorogood. And he was going to be up at Forebears, if I'm not mistaken. And so we made the connection, the phone call, and our guy got on with George Thorogood to do an interview. And George was an absolute jerk, just an
Oh,
absolute jerk, to the point where the interview lasted like 5 minutes and it was quick answers for everything. And the person that did the interview said, huh, I'm not sure what I did wrong there. I said, you didn't do anything wrong. You just didn't want to be interviewed. Nothing you can do there, man. You can't get blood out of a turnip, you know?
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
that one certainly is a one that I remember well because I was right there in the background listening and helping if needed. And I'm thinking, geez, George, you're a jerk. So all the George
Yeah.
Thorogood fans out there, now I've called George a jerk.
It wasn't me because that's the first time I think I've heard that name. So, but that's unfortunate too. But who knows? He could have been having a bad day, or that's just kind of the
Well, his big song was
risk you
Bad
could
to the
take,
Bone.
or talking with celebrities or musical acts. Oh, okay, okay. So I have heard George Thorogood. Then
Yep.
I know a lot of songs. I don't know who sings them, or half the time I don't even know the names of them.
George Thorogood
But
players. Yep.
okay, and then uh, so then you were also part of the Rough Rider days as well, and getting acts. Now, was that was that easier having your connections within? How are you connected as far as in the radio business to other musicians or getting in touch with, I guess, the musicians, people of sorts?
Uh, you know, I had the honor of serving on the Rough Rider Days concert committee for many years with Kevin Stockert and um, just other people that. And there's some funny stories there, and obviously we don't want to take up too much time, but we would sit down in a room on a conference call with Randy, the agent, and we would go through um, a list. We'd have a list, and then we'd go through and look at acts and look at their price and say, are they available on such and such a date? And some of the names that we talked about include Taylor Swift, um, Lady Antebellum, and Dr. Al King will ride me until I'm in the ground about not not wanting to get Lady Antebellum at Rough Rider Days, but they were going for like $25,000 at the time, and I wasn't the only one. We just went a different direction with the concert, but to this day, when I would see Al out at the golf course last fall and summer, he'd say, "You remember that Lady Antebellum thing?" We'll never forget that, Al. Thanks for reminding me. But yeah, and that, when at their peak, you couldn't touch them for under $500,000, and we had a chance to have them in Dickinson for 25 grand. And same thing with Taylor Swift. Now, would Taylor Swift have put butts in seats? Probably not, because nobody knew who she was at the time. Same with Lady Antebellum. It's all about picking an act that's on the rise and that hits at the right time and has a couple hits that you sell tickets. But some of the bigger names at Rough Rider Days. Brad Paisley was there before he was popular. Diamond or Rascal Flats before they were popular, and some of the worst selling concerts in Rough Rider Days history because nobody knew who they were. So we kind of hung our hat on let's get acts that are name recognizable, like the Little Texas, Diamond Rio, Lone Star, things like that. And you know, those are some classics there that we talked about. And now you look at those names and you say, yeah, they had pretty good careers. A name like Taylor Swift, she actually came up in
Yep.
conversation. So
Okay, yeah, that's crazy to think. And now she is one of the top selling musicians of or well, not your generation, but my era, Steve.
certainly,
Um, and then you were part of you talked about your goal of eventually owning and operating a station. How did coming owning the mix come about?
well, it was a unique situation where someone had a license for a radio station frequency. It's called a construction permit from the FCC, and that's all it is until you get that station on the air. Then you file with the FCC to make it an official license. And it never got on the air the first time, and it ended up in bankruptcy. And then the next thing you know, um, I had someone contact me and say, if we acquire this from the bankruptcy court, if we acquire this construction permit, would you be interested in managing the station? And I said, well, who's involved? And ultimately, it was my business partners, Brian Rummel, Chuck Rummel, Perry Baseflug, and Greg Kovacs. And I said, well, that's pretty good company. So it would have been different if it would have been some corporate operation coming to town to buy a construction permit. I wouldn't have been a part of that, but it was a great group of people, and we had a great ride.
Yeah, for sure. And what was that? What year did the mix launch? I'm trying to think here.
It was June
Was it
27th
what?
of 2010.
Okay, okay. And then how did you kind of decide on um and you say these permits and everything. So do you when you're looking to buy it, you still kind of have the freedom to kind of set up the station as far as what you wanted, if you wanted it like a talk radio, a country music rock station. How did you kind of decide on that you wanted it was more pop music instead of like genre based?
Well, the FCC doesn't control what the format is. The thing they control is the call letters. So the Mix 105.7 KDXN um, was available. Those initials were available. There's no duplicating call letters of radio stations. And the old standby is that west of the Mississippi was K's and east of the Mississippi was W's. So WKRP in Cincinnati, for instance. Um, Way back when radio stations only had three call letters: KOA in Denver. Um, uh, what WLS in Chicago? They only had three call letters. Well, then they ran out of letters. So then they said we better do four. And
Okay.
yep. And so um, KDXN was already built into the process. We got to pick the format. And basically, what I said when we sat down with my wife's help, we sat down and said, what's missing in Dickinson for music right now? We had classic country, um, we had hard rock, we had hot country, we had I think there was a couple of Christian stations at the time. We didn't have any stations playing top 40 or adult contemporary or even your classic hits, your stuff from the 70s and 80s. Nobody was playing that at the time. And so I thought, if we can find a way to meld these different formats, these different genres together into one format to give everybody a variety, that they're not going to hear the same songs all the time, because that also was a knock on especially pre-programmed stations or satellite radio stations, which we had almost all of at the time in Dickinson. And so we said, let's and then, of course, KDIX covered the talk radio and the information, and has always done a great job of local programming. So that was already covered. So we thought, let's play a music intensive format. And of course, it evolved as well, because the initial thought would be a balance of 70s and 80s with the newer stuff. But quickly we realized that the newer stuff actually was more conducive. And I'll say this, probably risking someone getting upset with me, but um, the the national statistic that's been pretty consistent over the years is that women affect directly or indirectly 80% of the buying decisions in America. So our goal was to be female friendly as a format. Play music that the females are going to like, um, strictly on the basis of that's what your ideal demographics for your advertisers are going to be. And if you got to sell advertising, because by the way, for the people who don't know how radio stations make money and why they play all those commercials, because that's what you hear when people are complaining, but radio stations sell advertising. That's how you pay the bills. And we thought, what, our best way to do that, especially with a brand new startup radio station with no history, is to have a format that's friendly to the masses, but also skewing more towards females.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then so this was a little bit was as far as social media goes, it was still kind of in the early genesis of really taking off. How did you promote this new? How did you promote the mix, and how did you eventually build your audience of ways to getting it to where the Mixed Up Morning Show was the premier show in Dickinson.
Well, the nice part about it was we got on the air at the right time. We went on the air in 2010, which for a lot of people was the initial phases of the oil boom. Um, and so we got on the right time there. There was plenty of opportunity financially in Dickinson and southwestern North Dakota. Um, so that was one of the things that we were focusing on. As far as promoting our station, we started off. You really didn't have necessarily, unless you're going to use a competing radio station to buy ads. But we did do some TV. We teamed up with a lot of cross marketing with companies like Consolidated, for instance. We've done a lot of things, and then of course once social media started, um, we had a website, we had social media, so those were ways we could reach out to the tech savvy people. But even then, it's hard to, you know, put a value on what benefit you're getting from either A, social media, or B, from your website. And we made a determination that we were going to stream our signal, and many conversations with our ownership group. Do we stream it just during local sports, or do we stream it all the time? because radio stations pay royalties to companies for the songwriters and performers. And if you stream your signal, just like your FM signal, you have to pay an additional fee. So, was it cost effective to do it? And we felt that it was. And our station continued to grow. We wanted to make sure that we were doing things local, that we were programming it all ourselves, and especially that we would take care of local sports. And with KDIX having a strong position within Dickinson and Dickinson Trinity and things like that, we wanted to also get out to the outlying areas and take care of those smaller communities, all the way from Beach to Glenullen, Hebron, and down to Bowman and into Mott Regent, and then up to Killdeer and over to Richardson and Taylor, and we covered a lot of areas, and thanks to those communities for always supporting it. They always, there weren't a lot of advertisers in those smaller communities, but they were always very supportive.
Yeah, for sure. And so when you started the mix, did you always have the plan that you were going to be broadcasting, whether it be football, basketball, or baseball? Was that always in the plan, or did those opportunities just kind of pop up?
Our initial order, when we ordered all the equipment we needed to run a radio station, our initial order included sports broadcasting equipment, because that was going to be an integral part of what we did. Um, and then, of course, it was, let's see how things go, and let's see what kind of reception we get from the communities, and who's going to support with advertising. Obviously, we can't do things that we lose money on. But we had to also be aware that um, we had communities that we needed to serve, not just Dickinson proper. So we wanted to make sure that they were part of the overall plan.
Okay. Do you do you have do you of your years of doing the games, do you have a memorable game that you remember calling that you still look back and think on?
Well, I remember being in Minot when Killdeer went to the state championship. That was pretty exciting. I remember covering Mott Regent in the state football championship at the Fargo Dome when they won it all.
Yep.
Um, there's a ton of them, and you look back and regional championship games and state state baseball, a lot of traveling, a lot of you know a lot of late nights. I remember going to Bismarck for the state basketball tournament, and I got sick the second day, and I couldn't talk, and I was covering Wells County or the Fessenden area at the state boys basketball tournament. And the second day after the game was over, I mean, I was throwing down cough drops and cough medicine. I would go back to my motel room and I would go to sleep. And I'd wake up the next day hoping that everything was cleared up. And I fought my way. It was horrible sounding, but I fought my way through that third game on Saturday. Similar situation happened when I was up in Minot covering the Trinity Titans at the boys state tournament. Got sick the second day. I don't know what it was, but it kicked my tail. You had to climb up in the rafters at Minot State
Yep.
broadcast from, and I couldn't even make it up the stairs on the second day. I did go the third day, but that second day I couldn't even make it up. So I took a feed from a station in on the eastern side of the state that was up there.
Okay, yeah. Though I know when we went in 2013, we got the opportunity to, after one of our games, to go up there and see the press box and see it from that view. And it was, I remember walking up there, and it gasses you, it wears you out for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then of course COVID. I feel like I had COVID before it was COVID. I had COVID before it was cool. March of 20, regional tournament at Dickinson Trinity. Did the Monday games, did the Tuesday games, started feeling horrible on Wednesday, couldn't do the Thursday games, and Nolan Dix from KNDC and Hettinger gave me a feed on Thursday, I didn't get out of bed for 2 days, and I still go back and say I think that was the very start of COVID, especially for me. But um, you know, it's one of those things. What do? You're left to how your body feels, and if you're not able to do it, you're not able to do it. But and then of course the COVID thing with that first year with state tournaments, Dickinson boys were at the state tournament and didn't even get to finish the tournament.
Yep. Yep, I remember that. That was because I the Region 7 championship was that night and we went to it and everybody was kind of in that like what's going to happen, nobody really knows, and then Beulah, one of the best games that I can remember. And I'm not sure if you remember it, but it came down to the wire. Trey Brandt hit a shot right at the end to win it, and then the next day they canceled the Class A, and then they postponed the Class B, which eventually ended up getting canceled. And then COVID happened, and that's a whole other thing. That how did you guys through um, navigate through doing a show having a morning show, and what were some of the creative ways that you at the mix came to talk about, or different things that you guys did to get through with not a whole lot going on?
Well, that was the thing. Fortunately, we were a music intensive station as opposed to talk radio, because I don't know what we would have talked about all day long. And um, I distinctly remember, like you said, I remember Beulah winning the region championship, and then the following day they said we're going to postpone it. We're not sure what we're going to do, and then ultimately it got canceled. And what a heartbreak for the Beulah Miners, right? I mean, you win a
Yep.
region title, and you don't actually get to play at the state tournament. So I remember that, and then of course, you know, at that point we're coming out of basketball and we'll be going into baseball in the spring, and then that all got canceled, so now we really had to regroup. A Financially, we had to say, how do we replace those dollars that we get for sports broadcasting, because we're not going to be doing sports. you know Businesses struggled, um, to the point where some businesses stopped advertising. So we had to, you say navigate, great word. We had to navigate through the business end of it. Also, we had to navigate through, the show, and you can't be, redundant and always talking about the negativity of COVID and so on and so forth. So it was, there's no doubt about it, and any business person will tell you it's the biggest challenge. There's a lot of businesses that never made it through.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's unfortunate, but that's just sometimes the way things work out. And now I got a couple of more questions, then we can get you out of here now. So actually, I think this might be my last one now. Is if you had the opportunity, whether it be from any different aspect of any realm of the world, who would be the one person that you would want to interview?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I should have asked, you should have asked me that in advance so I could have stayed up all night studying. Um, there George Gervin played basketball,
The Iceman. Okay.
Iceman. Um, I always wanted to meet George Gervin. I always wanted to meet Johnny Bench. Um, I was
Okay.
a Reds fan when I was a kid. Musically, there were many people that I wanted to interview, but I had some great opportunities. I got to go backstage with Garth, spent some time backstage with him, Wild Bill, and myself, and one of the greatest experiences of my life. And he was a super interview. He was a um, super host. I mean, he treated us like we were his best buddies, and we just met him. But Yeah, I don't know if there's one person that I would say that I think I've been blessed and had the opportunity to talk and meet a lot of different people. Um, we had our wall of fame there at the mix, and some people on there uh, who may not be known real well known, but they were famous to us because they were local people that had the artist of the Enchanted Highway. He was on the wall there at the mix, and um, some of the other people that other people may say, "Ah, geez, I don't know who that is. They're not famous." Well, they are to us, and so I don't think there's any specific one person to answer your question in a roundabout way. I guess that was like a politician's.
Yeah. Yeah, well that's tough though if you to nail it down to one cuz there are so many people that like even myself that I would love to sit down and have a conversation with. I know um Ken Keller, I remember him always saying that he had four people that he always wanted to talk with. It was Joe Mauer, General George Patton, and then I maybe it was just three. And then the third one was Edgar Allan Poe.
Really? Wow.
Yes. Yep.
Ken Keller wanted to meet the author of The Raven, huh?
Yep.
So who would
Man,
you?
who would
Yeah,
me?
if you had one
Man,
person.
okay. I would um probably I would have to say Michael Jordan's definitely up there. Tom Brady. Uh and then as far as like a broadcaster or somebody like that, one of the guys that I looked up to and always enjoyed listening to his games was Brent Musburger.
Mm-hmm.
I think he would be a fun one to talk to. Uh, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of them. Uh, I'm trying to think here. Steve Stroud.
Oh well, you got to meet him.
Yeah.
How about
uh,
Paul Harvey? He's another one that I would say, guy.
oh,
He
yep.
was my first job in Glendive. We were a Paul Harvey station. We played three different segments of him every single day, and pretty soon people just absolutely hung their world on what time Paul Harvey was on. I mean, he obviously a legend, but yeah, I think he would have not only been a good interview, but I think he was also a very humble man.
Yeah, that's always that. Those are the type of people that I would want to interview. I don't want to interview those guys that are just showing up. I want like where they'll lack. There's definitely some back and forth where you can have a conversation with them, and definitely those are the best ones where you can really learn about different aspects. Maybe a guy like a Hunter S. Thompson if we're going really off the wall because I don't know if you how much you know about him, but you read about some of the stuff that he's done. He was crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the experiences that he's gone through, whether it be because I know he was like he was like part of the Hell's Angels gang. He was a writer for Rolling Stone and would just cover anything and everything. So it'd be interesting to go and hear some of the stories that he could tell.
Absolutely. Yep.
But now, so you're down in Arizona now. What are you doing down in Arizona?
Well, I work for Maricopa Schools in the athletic department. I get a chance. I
Okay.
get a chance to work with coaches and players and equipment, and then I also get to do some PA announcing. So I get my ego part of it too.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So what are you doing at football, basketball? What sports are you all doing it for?
A little bit of everything. We're sports run different seasons down here than they do in North Dakota. Uh, for instance, the regular season for baseball will be done next week. Um, they keep adding sports here in Arizona. They have boys volleyball, they have beach volleyball for the girls, and then they have girls court volleyball in the fall. So they've got three different volleyball scenarios. Um, they're going to start girls flag football in the fall. Uh,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, and then I get to set up the games too, the fields or the courts, and make sure there's water, and especially down here where it's hot, need plenty of water. But we've got, like, tomorrow we've got boys volleyball, we've got varsity baseball, we've got JV softball, all home games tomorrow. So it'll be a busy day for us at
Yeah.
Maricopa High School. And Maricopa's growing so fast. They built a second high school last year, and I work at both schools, at Desert Sunrise as well, the new school, but they don't have varsity athletics yet. They just have freshman and sophomore students, and then they'll add a junior class next year and a senior class the year after.
Oh, gotcha.
So
Okay. Okay. So you are a busy man for sure. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on with me, Steve. It was good to catch up with you for sure. So we might have to do this later down the road at some point.
absolutely, I appreciate you thinking of me, Dylan.
Yeah, you bet. Now, well, and I have to thank you because you were the one that got me started in this, and I've been hooked on it ever since. So always indebted to you,
Well,
Steve.
thanks, Dylan. Do people see you on the road or on the sidewalk or the street, and they go, "Hey, 3GTP"? Do they do that stuff to you?
I've ran into a, like, as far as like Facebook friends and people, they'll talk and they'll ask me about it, and that's the fun part of it too, is you can go back and forth and have interactive sports debate with people, which is what I really enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the cool part. So just I'm just gonna just keep plugging away and eventually just keep see where it takes
All
us.
right. Well, keep up the good work, Dylan. Say hi to everybody in North.
All right, will do.
All
Thanks,
right.
Steve.
Take care.